Welcome, ACA. We are really excited today to come to you talking a little bit about the business side of the house. We have some practitioners and some wonderful counselors in their own right who are going to be coming and talking with you all today. We have the opportunity to hear from our phenomenal CEO, Rich Yep. And as you all know, we do these town halls so that we can reach out to our membership and allow them to have opportunities to talk with us as leaders, as well as focus in on some very, very important topics. One of the things that came up in our pre-planning for this meeting was compassion fatigue. And so we're going to hit that and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But I want to first turn it over to Richard Yep, let him say a few words, and then we're going to jump into meeting our guests for today.
All right. Thank you, President Butler. I appreciate that. I just want to also welcome everyone and remind you that next month starts Counseling Awareness Month. So I hope you'll go to the ACA website, check that out, see what resources we have for you. And for those of you who are interested in joining us in Atlanta for the ACA Conference and Expo, that also occurs in the beginning of April. So you can find more out about that on the website. So I think today's lineup is amazing. And so I am just going to cut it short with that. And again, just appreciate the fact that all of you are here today. Kent?
Thank you, Rich, and thank you for all that you do, and thank you for all that the staff does. I want to give a shout out to all the staff that are here today who are supporting and helping this effort out. I also want to thank you all for coming in and joining us. As Rich shared with you, we have the phenomenal ACA Conference and Expo that is going to be happening in Atlanta, April 7th through 9th, 6th through 9th. We want you all there. And one of the exciting things about the conference this year, I hope, is that we're going to have an international focus. And International Day is going to be on the 8th. And I'm hoping that people will come adorned in their attire, as well as teal colors, all things to represent who you are, the intersectionalities that you are identifying with. And so that you can show up that way and just kind of share with people throughout the day, throughout the whole weekend, who you are, what you bring to the table, and how we should respect you for everything that you bring to the table. And so with that, we're going to change over and we're going to talk about the business side of the house. I have two phenomenal guests today, both outstanding in their own right. And I have had the opportunity to know both of them. And I am so appreciative that they will both come on today to share their information. First, we have Dr. Jetta Robinson, who is known as the expert therapist. She is a grief and trauma therapist, best-selling author, international speaker, and income strategist. She has been seen in places such as Good Morning Washington, Headspace, Wall Street Journal, HuffPost, Washington Post, Business Insider, CNBC, Bustle, and Therapy for Black Girls. Okay. Wow, okay. I need her to be my, she's gonna be my person to get me out there and give me a couple opportunities. After serving as a grief and trauma expert for over a decade, Dr. Jetta Robinson began to leverage her years of clinical experience in her previous career as a corporate consultant to launch a mental health practice and scale it to 7 figures. She is a first-generation trauma and poverty disruptor who helps mental health and entrepreneurs create living legacies and financial freedom while helping communities heal. Next up, we have Lisa Henderson. Lisa is a co-founder, president, and COO at Synchronous Health and is a licensed mental health counselor. After working in the community mental health private practice and starting treatment center, she co-founded Synchronous Health, a behavioral health services and technology company. In the past 6 years, Synchronous Health has grown from operating in 1 state to serving participants in 37 states. Let me say that one more time. It's gone from operating in 1 state to serving 37 others. Having access to 1 million people who are employees, patients, and students of our customers, growing revenue by 6 times in 2021, performing above industry benchmarks on participant engagement in both human and digital services, and seeing clinically significant, that didn't work out well, seeing clinically significant improvements across all participant populations and conditions. Lisa has served as president and public policy chair of the Tennessee Counseling Association and chair of the American Counseling Association Southern Region. She has been interviewed by national publications on various industries topics by NPR's Marketplace, The Washington Post, NBC News, CNN, HLN, and an advisory board member of Forbes Health. Can I just give both of these young ladies a shout out and just tell them they are just doing phenomenal things, and we're going to hear from them. You thought you heard from Susie Olsman or whatever that woman's name is that does all this financial stuff. We come in here with Lisa and Najeta. Hey, how you all doing today?
Doing great, thank you.
Doing really well.
Excellent, excellent. I'm so excited to have you both here. Before we started coming on, letting people in, we were talking a little bit about compassion fatigue. And I just want to hit that right away. Can you all come and share with us what that means and what's happening in the industry today when it comes to that? Who would like to start us off?
I'll go. So we were talking about how as clinicians, we've been on the front line for a really long time. We've always been on the front line. And that has just gotten exacerbated, right? So oftentimes when we have been serving, we also haven't been navigating, right? Unless we've served in, in crisis situations or in war-torn countries, but we've normally not also been directly affected by the thing that we're often serving right in. And we've been doing that throughout this pandemic, but also we're just not exempt. We're actually uniquely and disproportionately likely to experience compassion fatigue because we're often siloed, especially in private practice, and we don't have the safeguards necessarily in place. And then you add being responsible for all the people you can imagine, right? From our employees to our mentees to our clients, and that compounds the impact or the exposure to developing vicarious trauma, to developing compassion fatigue and burnout, which we know impacts all of the people that we touch, right? And I think oftentimes we feel like we have to pretend that we're okay, and we continue to go to work when we're sick or unwell because of the responsibility that we signed up to serve. And does that really benefit our clients? But how do we center ourselves in this healing journey and model that? I think that has always been a challenge that is being amplified right now.
I'm seeing this play out in so many different ways at work. So there's certainly, this feeling of this is in some ways a really safe place where you're among peers and colleagues. And in other ways, it's really not necessarily a safe place that, depending on the culture of the environment you're working in, depending on the awareness of, how everybody is being impacted and affected by different things that are being thrown at us. We might be, experiencing some of the same things, but having a different impact on us, or we might be experiencing different things that nobody knows anything about. A lot of things are going on, behind closed doors, and you show up to work and, you might never know what they've been dealing with that morning before they got there. And so I think there's also, Aca was talking about the isolation, and, for us, we're a remote company, and we go to very great lengths to build community, and yet still you're not walking through the halls and seeing people and their smiling faces. You see them at regular and predictable scheduled times. And so there's just a little bit of a lack of connection that has to be accounted for in that. And I think there's what I'm seeing a little bit of, maybe not a little, maybe a lot of, is a lot of people are sort of exposed nerves, where we've been through 2 years of this, just the pandemic alone, not including all the other stuff that was going on before that, highlighted during, and then current, events of today. So to say nobody's really okay is, I think, an understatement. And, making it our mission to take care of ourselves, then each other, in concert with how we take care of our participants or clients is just part of the gig these days.
That's a very important thing for us to kind of understand and recognize as we continue to move forward, because we can not take care of ourselves. One of the things that we've been pushing this year, especially, is self-care. And I think what you all are talking about really lends to that as well. But we'll come back to that, and maybe you can interweave some of those things into this in terms of self-care and compassion fatigue and everything as we move forward. But I want to start off with another question to you all, because this is really why people are here, I believe. What are some important things one needs to know when starting off a private practice? We'll start with you, Lisa. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would say the probably most important thing to know is that you have every speck of ability that you would need to have. You might need some knowledge, you might need some mentorship, some coaching, but you've already proven to yourself that you have the ability to learn what you need to know. And, building that confidence and building the skills are separate from, having the ability to do it. Now, you might find that you don't want to do it, and that's okay too. But I think I see a lot of folks who are just not sure, their hesitation is about, can I? I've never been one for business, and you've already proven to yourself that you can learn. So you can learn these skills just like you can learn therapy skills.
One of the things that one should always recognize, I think, is that you should always be a lifelong learner. And so being a part of a business that you're creating is also a part of that learning experience as well. How about you, Ajetta?
So I would say, and I know that I cause a little bit of controversy when I say this, and I'm going to say, I know, is that I want folks who are thinking about starting a private practice to recognize that you, in starting that practice, you have a fiduciary responsibility for that business to be profitable. You have to adopt CEO habits. So you are a business owner who happens to be a therapist, and that's a very important shift. I call them CEO habits. And so we enter into this field, and we are trained even that we didn't enter this field to make money. And I want us to really think about that not being equal to there isn't money to be made in this field. Mental health healthcare is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So who benefits from those of us who are highly skilled and educated believing that we should not be paid well for the impact that we make on people's life? We save lives every single day. And I don't mean that in a way that means that we cannot create access to people who truly would not be able to access that care. But I also think about this, right, is as someone who grew up rather impoverished with an ACE score of an 8 out of 10 before I was 9 years of age, I couldn't afford the services that I currently provide. But what I can do, and what I have committed to doing, is charging what makes sense given where I'm located and the services that we provide, so that there's room from a financial perspective to serve those in my community who are underinsured, who are underemployed. And we wouldn't be able to do that. We saw more than 500 sessions pro bono, and my team still got paid because the business's first responsibility was to be profitable and viable and sustainable. And so I want us to come in understanding that we can be a therapist, but we have to be business owners and to operate with the responsibility that that requires. And so I think that's something we do not get in our programs. And that's not what our programs are designed to do, but that hurts us when we start private practices, is because we operate them as social service agencies without the funding and support, because that's not what they're designed to do. And so,
nice. So you brought in the student aspect of it by saying we're educated. So let's hit that. really quickly. So what, in addition to getting these great counseling skills, should students be doing so that they can go into this recognizing that they're going to create a private practice and be like you two?
Yeah, so I would say, there's I forgot to mention, I also am adjunct instructor at Vanderbilt in the counseling program. And so I've got, a class of students right now where, they're in internship and they're seeing for the first time in their sort of professional experience that, wait a minute, there's, people are paying for the services I provide, but I'm unpaid. And how do I make sense of that? And so we're actually talking through that of, do you know how much it actually costs to provide this internship experience to you? And then is there, margin above that? And, do your services make it possible for people who wouldn't have care otherwise to receive it? And so I think there's a place to weave it in just about every single class that is in a master's program. And having not taught or completed a doctoral degree, I can't speak to that, but I would assume it would weave in there as well. And so when I think about, if I'm teaching ethics, we're talking about the disservice that you do with clients when you let them not pay their bills when they're able to. And it's because of usually, I don't want to confront, or I don't want to derail therapy, or I don't want to talk about money instead of their, the issues that they're here for. And paying your bill is therapeutic. It is accountability. It is ownership. It is part of, being engaged in this therapeutic process. And being able to recognize and advocate as a counselor for, I think Ajit said it perfectly, that you have to be able to have a viable business. Otherwise, you are bringing people along on a very dangerous ride. If you're going to bring other people into your company, you've got a responsibility to make sure that they can continue doing their work, while you are able to continue doing yours.
Jetta, how about you?
I would add that I think sometimes, especially as whether we're students or just new professionals or just new to private practice, there's this belief that the practice is taking 40% of your income. And we don't really think about that in any other job or industry, right? When I worked for, in corporate America, I worked for Nestle, I didn't think about, oh, Walmart was my client, right? I had a multi-million-dollar client, and yet they paid me much less than that. And I didn't think, oh, wow, they're taking millions of my dollars. That's not how that worked, right? The company brought in the clients, the company did the marketing, the company was generating revenue, and I was compensated for the service I provided. And I think to some degree, we are doing our new professionals a disservice when we set them up with these compensation models where they believe that the company is taking a percentage of their income. The company is paying you for your time and your expertise, and the company is investing in what it looks like to market for your ideal clients. The company's taking the risk. If the insurance company doesn't reimburse me for a service, or they come back and recoup that, I don't go and take that from my employees. The business inherits the risk of being in business, right? And so I want us to really be mindful about the ways in which we're approaching these relationships. That has been something that I've experienced as an employer on the receiving end of people coming right out of graduate programs. And I think moving online and moving all of our services to virtual has made it more accessible to start a private practice. And I think that's a good thing, but it also has meant that we've skipped some steps about what it means to actually have a private practice or a business with good foundations, right? And so many of us moved right into telehealth, but we didn't develop a practice agreement, or we didn't actually secure malpractice that covers us doing telehealth, right? We don't have an accountant or a attorney. So we didn't actually do the foundational things because we don't have a physical presence. We're in our home in pajamas. And so our professional disposition has gotten a little bit skewed there, right? In a way that we have minimized that there's a lot of work that's involved, there's a lot of reward, but we don't get one without the other. And so I want people to have a realistic understanding of what it means to be running a private practice, but also some of the benefits of being a part of an existing practice. I don't want us to think that they're just like agencies, right? That feel exploitive and we think it's our rite of passage. I also think it's important to normalize that just because we went through the hazing of whatever our initial experiences were, often sometimes it's in agencies or other settings. Mine was in a medium security prison. That we don't have to force the new generation of students and professionals through that process in order for them to earn their stripes. And so I hear a lot of people talk about, I didn't go into private practice until I had been licensed for 7 years. Well, that's fine. However, that doesn't have to be everyone's journey, right? And I think the suffering that we impose on new clinicians is problematic in a way that we can disrupt. That's not the question that you asked, however.
It's
what you got.
All right. So that's really a phenomenal thing, right? Because it's about a mindset. Both of you are talking about a mindset that we need to have in order for excellence to kind of really show up. And so you need to be able to navigate all of those things. So just like we as counselors have to navigate the unknown, part of going into a private practice is kind of navigating that pathway as well, but then also seeking out support and mentorship from people like yourselves helps somebody kind of change that negative desire to kind of see things from an angle where, okay, I can't do this because I don't have what you just said, 7 years of service. I need to be able to kind of pay my dues, so to speak. You're saying you're already paying your dues just from being a counselor in the first place, right?
That's right.
So aside from being able to create your own private practice, and you are doing beyond the private practice piece, you're going on and doing some other things as well. Should students and new professionals try to specialize, or do you think that counseling is really, be ready to deal with almost anything? I don't know. Or should they kind of focus in on something? So like when I start my private practice, should I say, hey, I am a spiritual counselor and therefore that is what I'm going to do? Or should I just kind of be a free for all?
So I'll try that one on first. So from a marketing perspective, we have this saying that says a confused mind doesn't buy. And what that really means is that if you market to everyone, your ideal clients, the people who you actually do your best work with, they won't know that you're a good fit for them and that they're a good fit for you. And so the specialization doesn't mean that you rule people out. I talk specifically about grief and trauma, but I also have worked with clients who have depression and anxiety and communication challenges, because sometimes clients will say, oh, if she understands that, or if she can work with, this type of thing, then she'll understand what I'm navigating, right? And it doesn't mean that you also can't, I'm trained in EMDR and in brain spotting. There are protocols for anxiety, there are protocols for depression, but who I'm talking to specifically are those who have cumulative trauma or compounded grief, right? And so I want those folks to know every day of the week that I have expertise in helping, in being a companion for them on that journey. Other people won't just, well, she can't work with me because I don't have grief and trauma. And so I think we believe that if we narrow, if we niche down, that we won't have other clients. And that's just not the case, but you will be able to attract folks that you do your best work with. And I think we owe that to ourselves and to the people that we feel led to serve. So that's my 2 cents about whether or not you should specialize.
Anything, Lisa?
Yeah, and I just wrote down a confused mind doesn't buy, because we have a much wordier way of describing how we try to manage our marketing efforts. But I think, it's all really, the thing that I've found consistently over and over and over again is that the absolute best referral source are your current clients. And so if you're doing great work with anybody on anything, they're going to tell people that they care about and they're going to refer them to you. And so, there are pros and cons to that. You have to manage that a little bit differently. Know that you get talked about when they go to dinner together. As long as you're not talking about them, it's okay. But I think the thing that jumps out in that is that very rarely are they coming for the same thing. And so if you're going to specialize in something, specialize in being really good at understanding what somebody's problem is. And then if the problem is one that you don't have competency in treating, then absolutely, we have an ethical obligation to refer or develop the competency. I think the biggest piece there, though, is when people are, a lot of times when people are raising their hand and saying, I need help, what we don't want to happen is that they land in a place where then the person says, well, I don't do that. And so, I think it's almost, I think about it as more of a funnel into the field, into the service, not necessarily into my caseload, maybe not even into my practice, but I've got a wide sort of sieve, for people to come through. And then I want to make sure that they're getting care from the person who's best suited to deliver it. And, I'm a little bit lucky, and it's a little bit of a challenge where we've got, in one of our programs, we've got about 20 specialists, combinations of licenses, and making sure that everybody knows what each one is best at, so that when whoever comes in to see them presents, we know if I don't know how to do that, I know exactly who to get them to. And it is a warm handoff so that they feel cared about and known, not cast aside or handed off.
Can I pop in and just add one other thing? I want to, I needed this, so I'm going to just share it. Give you permission, whomever, to change your mind. I started my counseling career and even my private practice specializing in adolescents, right? My specialization, my dissertation was on trauma and with urban African-American youth. I loved working with kids and teens. And over the course of my private practice and of my career, that changed. I now exclusively work with Black women doctors. Oftentimes they have childhood trauma, but I had to give myself permission, and it was tough to change the population that I was working with as I changed in my identity, in the evolution of my career, and even in my skill set. My practice still serves. Our youngest client is 4, our most senior client is 101. So we're across the lifespan with grief and trauma. I no longer work directly with those clients. And so being able to change your mind is something that we get to do in this field, right? And that is perfectly fine. It is okay.
You just brought up something that made me want to ask you this. How do you work as a business owner and a counselor at the same time? What kind of time constraints and what type of mindset do you have to have in order to do both of those things?
Lisa, I don't know about you, but I had to, I answered my own phones for a really long time because I convinced myself that no one could answer the phone or convert clients the way that I did, until I learned that I was a really expensive receptionist, right? If my billable hour is $200 an hour, the business can't afford for me to actually answer the phone, because the business needed me to be seeing clients to bring in revenue to cover the marketing and, the admin and those things. As my team has gotten larger, I currently have 67 members of my team. The thing that the business needs me to do is to not be in rooms with clients, right? The thing that I do best is what I did for Nestle, was secure contracts with our local, state, and federal governments. And so the business needs the CEO. My number one job is to bring in revenue and to be a servant leader. And so I serve my team world-class service in-house, because their number one responsibility is to make sure everyone they encounter feels seen, heard, and cared for. That is also my number one job. Commitment to every member of my team. That is what takes up the bulk of my time. And for them to never have to worry about, oh, is this client pro bono or is this client on a sliding scale, because their income doesn't change if I do my job right. And so I now have 2 clients because I love doing therapy, but I have a responsibility to the business first and the viability of the business. And so it required that I shift out of being in direct practice the way that I previously was.
Lisa, anything?
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a similar boat there where, you know, we now, I think our total is 77 employees. Not all of them are all specialists, but 77 people are sort of doing the therapy and all of the back office work, all of the front office work. And so, you know, it is very similar in that, you know, I keep a caseload of maybe 5, but only one of them is weekly. Everybody else is, you know, kind of check-ins and, you know, seeing people who I've, you know, worked with for a long time. Part of why I've kept that though is because we are both a behavioral health services and technology company, and because most of our contracts are like into health systems, for example, there's so much workflow that part of my accountability to my team is that I know what I'm asking them to do. And so I need to, I treat those 5 clients that I still see as a little bit of my own experience of what is this workflow like? Is this a place that I want to work? You know, much less do they want to work here? And so, you know, it's really important to think of your team members as just as important stakeholders as the people that you're delivering care to. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to retain them. It is a hot job market out there, and you want to retain people and keep them performing well.
One of the questions I was going to ask, and I'm not going to ask, I think you kind of answered it a little bit, but I just want to throw it out there. But I'm going to piggyback it to another question. And so the question was, should you have a business partner? And I'm listening to you all saying that, you know, maybe the business partner isn't so much someone who you're bringing in to partner with, but, you know, your mindset is that now I am the business owner. I need to shift a little bit in terms of that. So when you talk about that, maybe you have a different perspective on that. You can share that. But should a counselor consult, should a business owner, you all, consult with lawyers or other outside entities that are out there that help to build your practice, right? So if you're not a person who knows how to do a lot of marketing or things that are doing that along those lines, are you bringing in somebody to do that? Are you bringing in a financial advisor to help you make sure that you are taking care of your financial side of the house? All those different things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of, you know, people have as much education and experience in their jobs as we do in ours. So we, you know, we take our education and our training very, very seriously. And then we're going to go out there and just, you know, off the side of our desk, try and figure out accounting and marketing and, you know, legal formations and those sorts of things. So I am a huge supporter of you'll pay for it now, or you'll pay a lot more for it later.
Absolutely. I echo everything that Lisa said. I always tell folks, you know, I started law school and I didn't finish for a reason. And so I stay in my zone of genius. And that's not it, right? Especially when we are, you know, I think about, you know, the accounting and the lawyer and the marketing team as prevention, right? Preventative healthcare, so to speak, right? And so there are things that a good accountant will, when my company needed to shift from being an LLC to an S Corp, it was my accounting and financial team, right? And then when we needed to shift from an S Corp to a C Corp, I can't tell, not only did it save us a lot of money, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm the first person in my family to own a business that pays. There's businesses, but they aren't making any money, right? That's a little bit shade, but seriously, right? Like it is my primary source of income. So it either had to work or it had to work. And so a good accountant and a good attorney will think about things that you won't think to protect, right? I didn't think that I had intellectual property to protect. Although I was training people in a grief model I created, nothing was preventing those employees from going out and taking the grief model that I trained them in. Because for me, it was like, well, you're not trained as a grief therapist. We provide grief therapy. We do 6 months of training in-house, and I didn't have any safeguards in place to protect that intellectual property, right? And so my IP attorney was like, wait a minute, before we train another group of people, you need to copyright and trademark this thing, which is also part of how the book came to be. But there's a full curriculum that's not even public. It's a part of our in-house onboarding that I just wasn't thinking to protect, right? And I was like, oh, well, if they take clients, then I operated from the perspective of there's enough clients. There's way more clients than we could ever we could ever like serve, right? And my attorney's like, that's not the same thing as someone coming to your business and using your business to build their own practice. And if you've been in business long enough, eventually something will happen. And it did, right? And so those are the scary things, right? But the proactive things, we were well positioned when COVID happened to move our team online and how to manage their mobile devices so that it protected patient confidentiality, right? Those are all things that our policies and procedures prepared us in the event something like we thought it would be shut down because of a school shooting or something of that nature, right? We didn't think it would be a health pandemic that would cause us to activate those protocols, but were we thankful that they were in place? Yes, we closed our physical offices March 13th of 2020. No one's been back here since. And we were live the following Monday because there were no gaps in our SOPs, right? And so those are things that investing in those infrastructures on the front end, or at least as you go, can help.
I didn't know what the SOP is, just in case. What's the SOP?
Standard operating procedure. So anything that you are doing that's in your head that someone else needs to be able to do and you want it done in a consistent way, you want to write it down. So that's how you get consistency in how things are done in your business.
Well, listen, let me shift gears real quick. Lisa, do you want to add anything to that? Let me shift gears real quick, and because I want to bring in people from the audience here to kind of ask questions as well, because I'm quite sure I didn't ask every single thing that people are interested in. But what I would love to really have you all speak to as I start to bring in others from the audience. You talked a little bit about state lines and crossing them, and Lisa, you have 37 different states that you're working with. Can you at least talk a little bit about what is it like understanding the different state laws, the different legislations and guidelines that are out there across different states, you know, the ones that you're particularly working within, and now that you're going across lines, what do you need to know, especially when it comes to telehealth?
Yeah, there's a lot to know. It changes less frequently today than it did all during, especially that 2020 was the hardest year to keep up with the moving target of regulations because there were so many executive orders. They would expire, some would get extended, some would be replaced. What we were being told at the federal level didn't always match up with what we were being told at the state level. And so basically what we did was focused on our core states that we needed to be able to serve. So of those 37, 10 of them are where, most of the concentration is, and the others are, a couple of people, here and there, but not anything like the other 10. So as we're trying to make sure that we're prepared to scale, we've got models, and again, back to experts, people who are experts in modeling utilization and all of that sort of stuff, how long people are going to stay, when people's caseloads are going to be, opened up, all that sort of stuff. That is like advanced. And, if you're opening a, small private practice, getting it started, you and a few others, you don't need all of that. But what you do need is to make sure that you have some way of making really good best guesses at how many people do you need to be able to deliver services to at the rates that you're able to collect in order to make sure that there is some consistency of cash flow. And so, talking about revenue coming in and, the expenses going out. And so telehealth and state line regulation is imperative in that, because if you're thinking about being over different states, then you need to make sure what is allowed. I will say the Psychologists are, not surprisingly, really far ahead of us with SciPact. There are 27 states that psychologists are able to practice across. The marriage and family therapists are also, they took a totally different approach. They are doing no compact, but instead they're doing reciprocity, and they have basically standardized reciprocity. There are only 5 states that aren't participating, that if you've got, a license in this state, you are automatically qualified. You still have to register. So you can't just start practicing, but you meet the requirements to be granted a license in another state. We are at 2 states right now, last that I checked, and I checked about 2 weeks ago. And I think we've got 9 more, or maybe it's 19 more, that have legislation proposed, but not enacted yet. And so once that gets enacted, as long as I could create an entire business plan off of, the compact states, and be able to, market in each of those states and bring people in. But the bottom line for right now is there's a lot of information out there. The best place is to go directly to the source, which is the state board, to see what their requirements are. You can get all kinds of resources that summarize it for you, but they're not always accurate. They're not always kept up to date.
Wow, that's great. That's great information. But I want to go to the questions that are coming into the chat. So Nicole Reber has asked, my goal is to specialize in oh my Lord, I can't even say the word any longer. Gerontological?
Gerontological, yeah.
My goodness, population. You all know what I was talking about when I said
Yes.
that, right? Somebody type that in, GERONTOLOGICAL. All right, population. Medicare's lack of coverage for CMHCs is a major problem the government is looking at. I want to have Medicare experts speak at the local political group I belong to. Any ideas who she might be able to reach out to?
So just off the top of my head, not necessarily a who, but just sort of doubling down on that. It breaks my heart to not be able to have my license, an eligible license for some of our biggest and fastest growing programs. And it's not necessarily because everybody in that population is going to be of Medicare recipient age. It's because at a health system level, they don't have that much clarity and specificity. So this is a real problem costing people jobs. And I think in terms of who to bring in,
Nicole, I can say Lisa Richriette wrote into the chat that Nicole could reach out to Brian Banks. He put his email address in there. So that'd be a good place for her to start.
Right.
Yeah, I think, so I've had the opportunity, I'm not sure what type, when you say Medicare expert, what you are meaning there. I've had an opportunity to connect with Brian, and I've been brought in to speak to, I've spoken at the Senate, our local house, things of that nature. I own a billing and credentialing agency, and so I probably talk about that more than most of us do, but that's a big point of advocacy, because oftentimes the folks who are voting on the bill, they don't understand the implications. I think that as counselors, we are it's important that we are talking about it because we are on the front lines and we see what happens. We're working with the client through a trauma, and then because they aged out of their commercial plan or something, now we have to disrupt that relationship and try and connect them with someone that actually takes Medicare that can do the work that they need to. And so we understand the impact that that's having, but I think that those of us who are providing the services are equipped to have those conversations. You are an expert to talk about the impact of what's happening on the ground in the field and personalize it, because everyone, we're all aging, right? Some of us more actively than others, but we all know someone that we care about that's impacted. And when we make it personal, then it changes it from being just policy on a piece of paper. It changes it from being political and being about people. And I think you have what you need to have that conversation. And I love our advocacy team. They're always super supportive. And so I will also throw my hat in there if you need any talking points or whatever to assist with. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So Mahuri Govindu has asked, first of all, this is awesome. I am studying in Pennsylvania and might take my license in Texas. So I am on the watch out for what might be different between these two states and how to go about it. Any suggestions?
I agree with Lisa's previous point about going straight to the source. And so when I was transitioning my license from Missouri to Maryland, I literally just pulled up a spreadsheet and put all of the criteria for both states and did a side-by-side comparison of what I already had and what the differences were, and found that I needed additional course in order to transfer or be licensed in Maryland, as well as additional hours. And so go right to the state licensing board. Texas does have some interesting things happening with respect to the way that they believe our licensor type can operate. They've had some legislative issues or legislative kind of conversations around whether or not we are eligible to even diagnose. And so you want to think about and look at the climate for LPCs or licensed mental health counselors in that state. Again, I think there's some real advocacy there and definitely some need. And so I would just do a side-by-side comparison.
So,
I think one of the things that would sort of be complementary to everything that Ajetta is describing would be, just to highlight the piece about you get to decide where you want to practice and where you want to live, and the climate that you want to work in. And I'm also, as I'm saying that, mindful about we don't want a drought anywhere. And so, you will be helping people anywhere you go. At the height of the pandemic, anxiety rates were 44% of the population. That is normally at 11%. And so people need your help. So there's nowhere that you shouldn't go. And also, you get to make the decision about, are you going to get involved at a legislative advocacy level? Are you going to be, someone who's going to maybe have a different set of things on your plate? And so, you need to go to a state where they've got really good, legislative advocacy going there. So I just would take a long view of where you want to live and how you want to work.
social justice advocacy should always be there. So that's really good to kind of understand. So thank you for that. So what types of things should a counselor know about billing and other financial matters?
Well, I just learned that Ajita is the consummate expert on this. So if you've got the billing and the credentialing, that's where it all starts. Well, if you're taking insurance.
Yeah. I think that's the question to answer for yourself, right? Is I think we think about insurance as a yes or no, right? When there's hybrid options, you could take some insurance and not take others, right? You could only take EAP. But I think being able to, one, make that decision for yourself that's not based on fear and that's not based on scarcity, but that how does it align with the way that you want to do this work? And recognizing that private pay only practices can create access as well. Again, what does that look like for your model? And then once, if you decide to take insurance, wanting to normalize that, you can master that process in a way, again, that doesn't keep you on the receiving end of recoupments, because I think that's the big fear. We have a responsibility to understand what our contracts say. And so another time and place where having an attorney or someone that's versed in understanding contract law, and then what your responsibilities are. I hear over and over again where clinicians get into a little bit of trouble is relying on, well, that's what we did at my agency. Well, agencies often have different contracts than the contracts that are issued to you in private practice. Agencies also commit fraud. And so the number one way that clinicians get a mark or lose their license is, one, by being intimate with the client, and number two is as a result of health insurance fraud. And most of health insurance fraud, roughly 80% of it, is intentional. And intentional being that we build it on purpose, not knowing that it was fraud or not knowing that it wasn't allowed, and that isn't a legitimate defense. And so what I would say is to at least educate yourself on what your contract says, the language in your contract, and then advocate. Oftentimes I don't see clinicians push back on the language from insurance companies or know the statute of limitations on recruitment request, and we are low-hanging fruit, right? And so one thing I always will say if I ever have an opportunity to talk about billing is just because they told you owe them money doesn't mean that you do. Sometimes the breach in contract occurred between the insurance company and their client, but you're easy to access. And so they end up getting their money from us because they can, because we don't know to appeal the request or the decision. And I think those are the things that can help empower us. So if we do decide to take insurance, we can navigate in a way that feels safe and that feels empowering to us first. So then we feel good about creating that access for our clients.
Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing to that. And I think, you Jida talked about, not making the decision of whether to take insurance or not based on, fear or scarcity. I would add to that judgment. It surprises me how many times I hear counselors or, the therapists of any degree or license say, I don't want to work with those people or those conditions, and it goes in both directions. I hear it about people who are using insurance. I hear it about people who are private pay, and whatever your, sort of social lens on finances and income, and whether people are using insurance or private pay, recognize when that's happening and do whatever work needs to be done. Our goal is, pretty straight down the middle on help people who need help, and everything else is a business model.
Really quickly, any tips on branding, advertising, marketing, any tips?
Yeah. So, I think first of all, let me say I'm really excited to hear what Ajita has to say about this, given her experience in it. Also, I think, the thing that is most important that I've observed, and really this emerged, I kind of felt it a little bit before the pandemic. During the pandemic, it really sort of came front and center to me. Be authentic and stay in your lane and avoid chasing trends, and unless you do it really, really well. And so during the pandemic, when I saw a lot of people, all of a sudden getting on TikTok and handing it to an intern who, had never been on social media before, because not all interns are like my nieces and nephews who can't live without it. So don't assume that, there's somebody who is just better suited to do something. Make sure that what is the marketing plan? How are you going to maintain it? What are you trying to achieve with it? And how will you know if you've done that? And so, as you're going through all of that, making sure that you're using your time and your resources wisely, and you're not actually doing more harm to your reputation with bad marketing than actually promoting the skills that you provide and the services that you provide in a reasonable and a realistic way.
All right, so in the chat from Dana Gaspers, want to know if they can get a hold of you all. Can you have your email so they can reach out to you for consultations? But there's also another question. Ajita, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything in regards to what marketing or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with what Lisa has stated. I will ask that your brand is not your logo. The logo is a part of the brand. And I say that because we focus so much on the logo, but your brand tells people either who you are or what you do, right? And we recognize Target's branding, whether they actually put the words, because there's some consistency, right? We recognize Nike and all the different variations, or even Apple, right? But we recognize their logo because of the way in which they position it alongside what they provide and what they offer. And so one, you can change your logo, right? We, again, just look at all the times that Apple has changed theirs as proof. And two, your brand is not about you. it is about who you serve, right? And so taking that into consideration, it tells a story. And so is the way that your brand has a voice, your brand has an image, are those things consistent? And so being in alignment. So when I think about, opportunities that I'm going to take, or say I've gotten sponsorship opportunities that are misaligned with my brand, your brand has values that you either can have on paper or you can live out. And I think that's really important for us to be mindful of. If it's positioned well, it attracts the folks that you desire to be attracted to. It rules out the people that aren't a good fit. And so consult with a brand consultant. That's not my jam. I can tell you more what not to do in that regard, but do it on purpose again, and feel free to change.
On purpose. That's very nice. Hashtag on purpose.
That's right.
All right. So one last question, and we're going to break into our little breakout groups. And I'm going to bring in Brandy or someone from the staff to kind of share what's going to be happening next. But we have one last question in the chat from Mahuri again. Wants to take the liberty to ask a question about narcissism. I want to specialize in helping the narcissistic victims exclusively while being open to clients with other needs. Any certifications, CEs, specializations that you would recommend for victims of narcissists? Feels that it's growing rapid. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think I would say true of any specialty, vet out whatever certification you're thinking about getting. Because I don't think most people know certifications are not generally regulated. So you can say that you have a certification in something like that you created yourself. And I think, we do that. And I think it sounds like Ajita does that too. And so there's nothing wrong with doing that. The problem is that I'm only going to do it when I know that what I've got is good and different. And I can't say that that's true for everybody who's figured out that they can make money selling certifications. So just make sure that whatever the certification you're getting is one that you've vetted it, and it doesn't have to be anything in depth or formal. It can just be, do I believe what I'm reading on this website? When I look at this course material, does it look like it's rooted in best practice or evidence supported at all?
It almost sounds like what you're saying is better to probably say I specialize and go get the specialization as opposed to trying to find some certification there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I have a ridiculous amount of certification. So I also still agree with that. I also want to gently push back on the rapidly increasing prevalence of narcissism, right? And the narcissistic injuries. And in no way to minimize the survivors of those who have truly experienced these, been on the other side of folks who are experiencing narcissism. In that how much of the prevalence of what we're seeing is that the larger society has gotten a hold of this term, and now everyone's ex is has narcissistic personality, right? So how much of this is the social media effect, as opposed to it is actually increasing in the population in ways that is clinical, right? Because just because, listen, I have some not nice words about my ex-husband. He does not meet the criteria for narcissism, right? I just threw, I was not going to say them, Dr. Butler, did you see his face? But again, because that is what's happening, right? We specialize in high conflict co-parenting. We specialize in parent reunification as a part of that grief journey and trauma journey.
Yeah, I'm not even listening to you anymore. Go
I
ahead.
know, you're not.
Go ahead. Go.
And it's because everyone's coming in saying that their co-parent is narcissistic. It's like, there's probably a lot of trauma, but is it narcissism, right? Is it a narcissistic injury? And so I want to make sure that we are good gatekeepers around that. Is it increasing? Likely. At the prevalence at which it is showing up on social media is probably not accurate in those ways. But I echo.
There's a lot of times that things happen and we like to necessarily run to it, right? We just be like, so somebody wants to now go and, again, watch who's sharing the narrative.
Yeah, everyone has OCD as well. So,
well,
according to social media.
No, so listen, Thank you both so much. So much for being here for this first hour. This has been phenomenal. The amount of knowledge that you both have kind of shared in this little brief amount of time has been absolutely excellent. Could not have picked two better people to talk about this today. So I really, truly thank you all for coming and being a part of this. Ajetta and Lisa are going to stick around for one more hour. They're going to go into a breakout room with those who would like to go in and hang out. The purpose of the breakout rooms are just to kind of have some little bit more intimate time to kind of talk about and have some questions answered. I have a breakout room. There will be one for college students. There will be one for professionals, and there will be one that's on this topic area. I'm not sure all the other ones that are there. But again, the purpose is just to kind of hang out a little bit more for the next hour to kind of talk about things that are coming up for you all so that we can kind of share from those perspectives as leaders. Again, Ajetta and Lisa, I don't know what I have to give you all to thank you for all that you've done today. Perhaps I can nudge, maybe now that you've done so great here, you can come and do a presentation at the Aca Conference, Ajetta, since you're not on the docket to come.
I'm game for that.
You game for that? All right, so listen, I'm going to turn it over to Brandy. Brandy, come on in and let's see what's up. What's next? How do we get people to come and do what they got to do?
Thank you, Dr. Butler. And again, thank you to Lisa and Ajetta. That was awesome. Even for a non-counselor, it was such great information. Really, really appreciate it. So if you are not sticking around for the second hour, you can find the recording of the first hour on ACA's YouTube channel. That will be up by, I'd say, the beginning of next week. So please make sure that you let your colleagues know about this recording, and all of the other town halls are up as well. So in a minute, when I'm done talking, we are going to open the breakout rooms. If you have not been in a meeting where you self-select a breakout, you'll see an icon, actually a window pop up, and there will be a list of the breakout rooms that we have available. Today's topic will be where Lisa and Ajetta are. There will be a room for Dr. Butler. There will be a room for students, practitioners, counselor educators, and school counselors. So choose which room you'd like to go in. If you have trouble getting into one, just please turn your mic on and let us know where you'd like to go, and we will make sure that you get there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope to see you all. Stick around and get some more good knowledge.
Thank you.